Anyway, here we go. First one, if I can figure out how to advance my screen. Here we go. So John McKinley Ward sent this one over from Wheaton Regional Park. If you guys were out looking for morels, you may have happened upon these. His pictures were a little blurry, sorry about that, but you can see the distinct umbo on this, the brown mushroom. Looking at the base, it's got leaves. This was growing terrestrial, grown from the ground. You can sort of make out a bit of a pink hue. It seems like I could see it when the picture was smaller. I don't see it too much in this, but you could see a pink hue, which is the spores maturing. So this is a very common mushroom in the spring. There are other entelomas that you can find throughout the year. I've put Entoloma vernum group on here because vernum apparently is like a European species. So there's probably a lot of similar species that look like this. And so this may not necessarily be vernum, but vernum kind of indicates spring. And they call the Entolomas pink gills because their spores, once they start maturing, start turning the gills pink. Elizabeth was talking about the Pluteus. Those are also going to have pink gills. Those grow on wood, though. Those will sometimes it may look like they're growing from the ground, but they're growing directly from wood. They tend to have more of a white stipe as well, instead of this kind of brown concolorous stipe to the cap. They also have free gills. These have attached gills or adnexed gills or adnate. So they're somehow attached to the stipe. These are terrestrial. These could certainly upset your stomach. The others, if you find those, the free gills are very distinctly free on those if you find good ones. And so that's a great example of what free gills can look like. I don't have a picture. Nobody sent me a fawn mushroom this month. Anyway, moving on. All right, yeah, I'm kind of starting with a lot of the typical spring mushrooms that you see around this time of year. Regina Zopp sent this over. I've seen quite a few of these guys. It's pretty common for them to have these cracked caps happening. Sometimes you find them and they're not cracked. This is just kind of environmental conditions. They start coming out, it gets dry, the wind starts blowing, cap starts breaking up like that. You can see that these have attached gills. It did have the remnants of a ring, a partial veil here. She even was able to get a little spore print, which on this one, they would call that brown, even though, in my opinion, it's kind of almost hinting towards a purple. But this is another of those, another cluster. So this is actually one of the Agrosipy praecox cluster. And so there's a lot of similar mushrooms that look like this. Very common in the spring. Many times you'll find this grown in mulch. She found these in leaf litter and old sticks and stuff like that. All right, John found this stump, which when I started looking closer, it looked like there were quite a few different things growing over here. Looks like that's some old oysters. Over on this side, I don't know if that's like old or just fresh, maybe Trichaptum biforme, or it could be like Lentinus neostrigosus coming out. And these little dots, I think, might be Leucogloia compressa, which I like calling wood pimples. But anyway, he was asking about these guys right here. And these are another one of those super common, find them in the spring next to stumps like that, grown from old rotting roots and things of that nature. These are in the inky cap group. So this is Cuprinellus micaceus. Because it's been raining, oftentimes if it's been dry, you'll see lots of little kind of granules on the cap here, and they can sparkle in the light. And so this is where they get their name, mica caps. You can see they got very close gills, start off white, go to kind of a pink to black, and then they deliquesce. And so these are why they're the inky caps, and they'll self-digest themselves, and the spores will just drip away. This is a Cuprinellus micaceus, or the mica caps. Apparently these are edible. I've never tasted them. We had one person who said like if he found a cluster like that, he would get the pan super, super hot. I think this was Bill Russell told us this. He has a little ID guide for 100 edibles or something like that. And get the pan super, super hot, throw them in, turn off the heat and put the lid on and kind of let them steam in their juices. I don't know. I usually only find like 12 of them. And you do that and you've got maybe a bite because they turn to nothing since they're 90% water and just kind of turn to goo. All right, John Klonowski found this at Greenbelt Forest Preserve. I always like finding this one. This is another one of those spring mushrooms. Uh, this is a big fat round one. Sometimes they're a little bit more vase shaped. You can see he got a shot of the base here, so it is growing from a stipe. These do grow from wood, so it's actually probably growing out of this little stick right here and just kind of curving over. This is an ascomycete, so like your cup fungi, like your morels, on the inside here, instead of having gills, it's got the hymenium, this fertile surface right here. It's covered with little asci, and they're like little tubes filled with the spores. And there's usually 8 or some multiple of 8 in there, and they fill with water. And the hydrostatic pressure tends to pop open the lid. Sometimes they have a little cap on their little perculum, and it squirts the spores out. So if you do see this one, you can try either like just tapping it on the side, and sometimes that'll make a lot of them release at once, and you might get to sometimes hear it or see a puff of the spores come out the top there. This is called the devil's urn or Urnula craterium. Find these in the spring, and I don't think I saw any this year. I can't see. Daniel Berman sent this one in, found these in mulch when he went to go take a walk. And if you're in an urban environment, just be careful because I'm pretty sure these might be some dog poops there next to him. So you probably wouldn't want to be eating these, but he was interested in wondering what this was. And as you saw from Elizabeth, a lot of people are finding Stropharia, the king Stropharia. Now, a lot of times this ring here will be left on the stipe, and this is the Rugose annulus. So this is Stropharia rugoso annulata. They end up having, they start kind of white gills and they progress to like a purple black color. These can get really big. That's why they call them the garden giant. And then you get the wine cap from the color. If they're in the sun, they're going to fade out. They can go to tan or brown. I had some growing up. You guys may remember last year or a couple of years ago, I put some. And so last year, I actually got to show you guys a picture of some popping up in my asparagus bed. Well, with all these rains, they're still happy and growing more. So I've got a few out there right now, and it looks like they're actually spreading to different parts of the yard. And so I've had these for a few years, and I just keep adding wood chips. So you can just keep a patch going like that if you're able to get some spawn, or if you find them in the wild, you can always like bring that stem butt home. Try and keep it like damp or moist, and then bury it in some relatively fresh wood chips, and you might get something going. Speaking of gardening, Michelle Holtzman sent this over. She only had the 2 pictures. That I don't know if it really helps much, but you can kind of see the different color variation depending on how the sun's hitting it. But she had set up some hugelkultur beds, and basically all that is you take logs or sticks or things of like that, and you mound them up, and then you put some dirt and other compost and things on them, and you're basically expecting that to break down, and over time it's going to make a very fertile soil. And so because this is like logs buried in dirt, this looks like this right here is a kind of a log underneath, growing or waiting for that to break down. And so there happened to be some dryad saddle on there, Serioporus squamosus, and staying damp, being covered in the moist earth like that, it had enough moisture to really get a good fruiting. That's also indicating those logs are going to break down well, and she'll have a decent hugelkultur mound in short order. All right, April Wyman sent this from North Carolina. We've had this one a lot of times, so you guys probably recognize it. A little closer pictures, like this is the dog vomit slime. So this is Fuligo septica. She poked it with a stick right here, so you can see it's really just a plasmodium, like that amoeboid stage, just trying to form this fruiting body structure. They call it the dog vomit slime or the scrambled egg slime. And I actually put in a zoomed in picture, so you could actually kind of see all this interwoven. This is probably like the plasmodium kind of growing over itself. I just thought it was really kind of cool. I'm not certain what this reddish coloration is. I don't know if that's an oxidation reaction, whether that's bugs munching on it, or I'm not sure what that is. And I don't know that I've seen that before, but it's interesting. If anybody knows what that is, or feel free to mention. Anyway, she said that was like about a foot wide and probably at least an inch or two thick. It's a pretty big one. She also found this in Sharpsburg. You may have noticed a picture of this on the INAT page that Elizabeth had up. So they're really weird looking, but I think they're really cool looking too. So this is something they call the cedar apple rust. It's a gymnosporangium. These are like teleal horns. So these things grow out from a gall looking structure. All this rain is really going to puff them up. Apparently they can even like dry out and rehydrate and dry out and rehydrate. And this can happen over and over again. It keeps releasing spores. Those spores end up trying to find some sort of apple, crab apple, and then they'll infect the buds or the leaves, and they'll grow on those and form little different discolorations sometimes. And then they'll usually start growing kind of not necessarily exactly the same, but little protrusions from the underside of the leaf. Those release a different spore, and those spores make their way to other cedars or juniper plants. This is a Juniperi virginiae, gymnosporangium. You'll also see a different gymnosporangium on something like serviceberry, and it grows little spiny looking sea urchin things out of the berries. All right, moving on to more weird orange globs. So April also found this one. This is, some people call it deer vomit, slime flux. This is actually more of a conglomeration of different organisms, but I think one of the main ones is Fusicola mesmeroides. And so they've tried to genotype this, and apparently every time they do, they get different answers. And so there's all kinds of different things. So kind of in my mind, I think of it a bit like a kombucha SCOBY, where you've got like a bunch of different organisms growing together. But these are usually found on grapevines. So this kind of does look like it might be a wild grapevine that's been cut. And then the sap starts growing, oozing out. And this is where that grows. You can also find it on trees that have branches cut and things like that. And so it's able to eat those sugars and different things, different nutrients that are in the sap. It's kind of gross. Actually, I was reading up on this a little bit more, and they had a picture of people licking it. I don't know why, but anyway. All right, Marilyn Mendel sent this one in. I am not the best at the Perennomycetes, and she had suggested Jack Rogersella coherens. And so this is a bit newer name for me. I was on Ethan's walk, which was great, and he's very knowledgeable about this. I started trying to get into these, and like I thought I was doing good before I had the Ask a Mycete book. And I was like, oh, that's multiforme, and this is, fusiforme. And I thought I'd figured it out. And now I realized I haven't figured anything out. So there's a lot of details to look into. If you look closely here, these kind of little bumps with a pimple right in the middle, this is the perithecium. So this is where these are another ascomycete. And so that's a little hole, and that's where the asci is going to poke out and to eject the spores. And so it's got lots and lots of these. And listening to Ethan, a lot of times you'll need to know what this is growing on. A lot of times you'll need to kind of scratch pieces off and see what kind of pigments can be extracted with KOH, and you'll see different colorations. So this may be the correct species, but I'm not certain myself. But you can spend a lot of time trying to figure these things out, and they are really cool looking. Even though they may not be big and showy, they're still really neat. Marilyn sent this one in. I don't know if you remember the last ID I did, but I had a slide with this in it. So I was like, well, I may as well throw it in again. This is Ilobolus brustulatus, the ceramic parchment. On one of the morel forays recently over at Roundtree Park, there was a tree that or a fallen tree, and it was almost all covered in this. It was really cool. When you see a lot of it, it's really a neat fungi growing on wood, and it kind of hardens the wood too, so it seems like it lasts longer. All right, Marilyn sent this one in as well, and you may have seen something like this and you're like, oh yeah, that's that white Trametes that we see all the time. And that may be what this is, but it may also be something else. So when you look at the underside, normally Trametes gibbosa has kind of more of a mazy pore surface. Well, there's another one that they're trying to kind of put a name on, and they haven't really necessarily come up, decided. I think I read on Michael Kuo's site that they put some sort of wrong date or something, and so they can't actually give it this name, but they were going to call it Trametes aceculi. And a couple of ways that you can distinguish it is they're usually smoother on top, they're usually not as thick and chunky, and oftentimes it'll have a different type of pore structure, sometimes even more poroid than maze-like. So we see these big white polypores and we keep calling them Trametes gibbosa. We may be kind of lumping, and if you look closer, you might be able to distinguish it. Might be actually something else. And Yasmin Padilla sent this one over. I think you guys might be able to see that's wood ear. I told her it maybe should be called wood tongue. It looks like it's sticking her tongue out at her. Or if you look close, it's almost like two eyes. That's the nose, and this is a little sad mouth. Anyway, this is wood ear. They've changed it from auricularia auriculae to auricula angiospermarium in hardwoods, and I can't. I should have looked it up. I can't recall there's another one that's on conifer. But anyway, this is your typical wood ear mushroom. Last one here, submitted by April when she was in Grenada. And when I first was looking this, it was a little more zoomed out, but I was totally drawn to all the lichens on it. And I totally missed the little anole lizard growing or peeking out right there. But look at that multitude of lichens. And it makes me wonder, like, if you were to shine a UV light, how many different colors would you get fluorescing off of that thing? But anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. So I have prepared that my old photo submission email. I was going to send it out before the meeting, but I figure I'll just wait. So look for that. And it just kind of gives you a little bit of background if you want to send images. I used to just be like, hey, try and send 3 every time, but it's okay. Just try and follow. If you want to just send 1, try and get all the features. And if you want to send 2, do a top and a bottom type thing, but you'll see. Anyway, thanks everybody. Sorry, no morels in the presentation. And I don't know about you guys, but I hope you did better than me, but my spots didn't do so good. I guess maybe we can look forward to next year. But there'll be other cool fungi coming out soon. So anyway, you guys take care.